My parents banned me from seeing my son in the hospital after the car accident that my mother caused while driving drunk with him in the back seat. But they told the entire family that I was the driver and was running from responsibility. I discovered the truth when the nurse showed me the police report with my mother's name as the driver. She had initially given my name, but the traffic light cameras proved it was a lie. I walked into the hospital room with the report in my hand, in front of my aunts, uncles, and grandparents that she had convinced to take her side, and read every detail out loud while she pretended to faint. The hospital security guard's hand was firm on my elbow as he escorted me away from my son's room, my mother's theatrical sobs echoing down the corridor. Through the small window in Michael's door, I could see him lying in the hospital bed, his left arm in a cast, monitors beeping steadily. He was 7 years old and calling for me, but my own mother stood between us, dabbing her eyes with a tissue while my father wrapped his arm around her shoulders protectively. My grandmother, Eleanor, sat in the corner chair, her face set in disappointed lines as she watched me being removed like a criminal. I turned to the security guard, my voice breaking despite my attempt at composure. "Please, I just need 5 minutes with my son. He's scared and he doesn't understand why I'm not there." The guard's expression softened slightly, but he shook his head. "Ma'am, I have strict instructions from the family. Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds have made it clear you're not to have contact with the patient until this situation is sorted out." My Aunt Linda appeared in the hallway, her arms crossed, her face twisted with disgust. She had always been my mother's loyal soldier, never questioning, always believing. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Jessica. Getting behind the wheel, drunk with your own child in the car, then trying to sneak in here like nothing happened." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "What are you talking about? I wasn't driving. I wasn't even there." But Linda's expression only hardened. "Your mother told us everything. She said you begged her to cover for you, that you were crying about losing your job and custody of Michael. She was trying to protect you, and this is how you repay her?" My mind reeled as I processed this information. My mother had told them I was the driver, that I was drunk, that I had caused the accident that put my son in the hospital with a broken arm, 3 fractured ribs, and a severe concussion. The security guard's radio crackled, and he gently but firmly guided me toward the elevator. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises, ma'am." As the elevator doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of my mother through Michael's doorway, her head resting on my father's shoulder. The perfect image of a grandmother traumatized by her daughter's recklessness. But I knew my mother, knew the way her mind worked, the way she could twist any situation to her advantage. This felt like one of her manipulations, but it was more elaborate, more vicious than anything she had done before. The elevator descended, and with each floor, my shock began transforming into something sharper. My mother had her weaknesses, her secrets I had kept out of family loyalty. She drank more than anyone acknowledged, had for years. There had been minor incidents before, fender benders she blamed on other drivers, a cracked garage door she claimed appeared mysteriously. My father always smoothed things over, always had an explanation that protected her image. Outside the hospital, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to steady my breathing and think clearly. My phone buzzed with incoming texts, and I watched in numb horror as the messages appeared. My Uncle David, "Can't believe you'd endanger Michael like this. Don't contact us until you get help." A cousin I barely spoke to. "Just saw what happened. You need rehab immediately." Another cousin, "Mom always said you had problems. This proves it." The family group chat that I had been removed from was clearly buzzing with my mother's version of events. She had worked quickly, methodically turning everyone against me within hours of the accident. The calculated efficiency of it made my stomach turn. I drove home on autopilot, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. My modest condo in the Pearl District felt suffocatingly empty without Michael's scattered toys and endless chatter. I paced from room to room, my mind racing through what I knew. The accident had happened around 4 in the afternoon. My mother had picked Michael up from school as she did every Tuesday while I worked late at the dental clinic. They were supposed to go to the park, then she would drop him at my place by 6. Instead, I had received a call from my father at 5:15, his voice tight with controlled panic, telling me Michael was in the hospital and I should not come because I had already caused enough damage. When I pressed for details, he hung up. Now I understood the strange phrasing, the way he had seemed to be reading from a script. My mother must have been right there, feeding him the lines, crafting her narrative even as emergency vehicles surrounded the crash site. I grabbed my laptop and searched for accident reports, but nothing came up yet. It was too recent. I called the hospital asking to speak with someone about my son's condition, but they would only confirm he was stable and that his grandmother and grandfather were with him. When I identified myself as his mother, there was a pause, then a cool statement that his guardians had requested no information be released to me. Guardians. The word made my blood boil. I was Michael's mother, his only legal guardian since my ex-husband had moved to Seattle for work and maintained minimal involvement. My parents had no legal right to block me from my own child. I pulled up the contact information for my lawyer, the one who had handled my divorce. It was past business hours, but I left an urgent voicemail explaining the situation. Then I sat in my living room as evening darkened into night, staring at my phone, reading and rereading the condemning messages from my family, each one another nail in the coffin of my reputation. Around midnight, my father called. His voice was quiet, heavy with what sounded like genuine disappointment. Jessica, I think you need to seriously consider checking yourself into a treatment facility. Your mother has agreed not to press charges if you get help voluntarily. The manipulation was stunning in its audacity. Dad, I wasn't driving. I wasn't even there. I was at work until 5:30. My boss can confirm it. The clinic has cameras. There was a long silence. Your mother said you would say that you'd deny everything. She said you've been drinking more lately, that she's been worried for months. The lies flowed so smoothly from his mouth, delivered in his calm banker's voice that had always made everything he said sound reasonable and true. I could picture my mother beside him, nodding along, perhaps even writing notes for him to follow. She's lying, Dad. I don't know why, but she's lying. She must have been the one driving. Was she drinking? Another pause. That's a cruel thing to say about your mother, especially now when she's beside herself with worry about Michael. She was completely sober when she picked him up. She told me she had just come from lunch with her book club friends. Book club. The book club that met at restaurants and went through 2 bottles of wine before anyone remembered they were supposed to discuss literature. I had been to one of those lunches once, watched my mother match the other women glass for glass, then insist she was fine to drive. I had driven her home that day, making an excuse about needing to borrow something from her house. Now I wondered how many other times she had driven after those lunches, how many times she had put Michael at risk before this. I want to see my son, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. If you don't let me see him tomorrow, I'm calling my lawyer and Child Protective Services. My father's voice hardened. You're in no position to make threats. The hospital has been informed of the situation. They won't let you near him. And if you try to cause problems, your mother will go to the police with what she knows. The call ended, leaving me shaking with fury and disbelief. My own parents were holding my son hostage to cover up my mother's drinking and driving. The woman who had spent my entire childhood maintaining a perfect image, who cared more about what the neighbors thought than about truth or consequences, had finally gone too far. The next morning, I arrived at my workplace an hour early, my eyes gritty from lack of sleep. I found my boss, Dr. Rachel Kim, already in her office reviewing patient files. She looked up with concern when I knocked. Jessica, are you okay? You look terrible. I explained the situation quickly, my words tumbling over each other. When I finished, she was already pulling up the clinic's scheduling system and security footage. You were here until 5:45 yesterday. I remember because you stayed late to finish Mrs. Patterson's crown prep. The accident was at what time? 4:15, according to the text my father sent before he called, I said, showing her my phone. Dr. Kim turned her computer screen toward me. You clocked out at 5:47. Our parking lot camera will show you leaving. I'll have IT pull the footage and send it to you immediately. Relief flooded through me, but it was bitter. I had proof of my innocence, but the fact that I needed it, that my own family had condemned me without question, left a hollow ache in my chest. Within an hour, I had a USB drive with time-stamped footage, clearly showing me at work during the accident. My lawyer, Amanda Torres, called me back at 9:30. I met her at her office downtown, and she reviewed everything with sharp, methodical attention. This is parental alienation and defamation at minimum, she said. The question is why your mother would do this. What does she gain? I had been asking myself the same question all night. My mother drinks. More than anyone admits. She's had minor accidents before that my father covered up. About 15 years ago, she got a DUI, but my father knew someone in the prosecutor's office and it got reduced to reckless driving. The family never talks about it. Amanda made notes. So she has a history. She was likely intoxicated during this accident and panicked. Giving your name to police would buy her time to craft a story. She looked up at me. Did the police actually charge you with anything? I shook my head. I haven't heard from police at all. She picked up her phone. That's interesting. If your mother filed a report claiming you were driving, they would have contacted you by now. Let me make some calls. While she worked the phone, I sat in her office watching the Portland morning traffic through the window, thinking about my son alone in that hospital room, probably confused about why I had not come back. Amanda hung up after her third call, her expression grim. I spoke with a contact at Portland Police. There was an accident at the intersection of Burnside and 23rd yesterday at 4:17. Single vehicle collision with a traffic pole. Driver gave the name Jessica Reynolds initially, but the responding officer noted the driver appeared intoxicated and requested a breathalyzer. The driver became combative and changed her story, claiming she was Patricia Reynolds and had been confused from the impact. By then, traffic camera footage was being reviewed. My heart pounded. What did the footage show? Amanda pulled up an email on her computer. I asked them to send me the public accident report. It's not officially filed yet, but my contact sent me the preliminary version. She turned the screen toward me. There, in official police language, was the truth. Driver, Patricia Ann Reynolds, age 58. Blood alcohol content, 0.13, well above the legal limit of 0.08. Contributing factors: speed, impaired driving, failure to maintain lane. The driver initially provided false identification to officers, giving her daughter's name and date of birth. The room seemed to tilt. My mother had not just lied to the family, she had lied to the police, had tried to frame me for drunk driving with my own child in the car. If those traffic cameras had not existed, if that intersection had not been one of the newly monitored ones the city had installed last year, I would be facing criminal charges right now. Amanda's voice cut through my thoughts. This is prosecutable on multiple levels. The DUI, child endangerment, providing false information to police. Your mother is looking at serious charges. I need to see my son, I said. That's the priority. Everything else can wait. Amanda nodded. I'll draft a cease and desist letter to your parents immediately, and I'll contact the hospital's legal department. They have no right to keep you from your child. We can also petition for an emergency custody order if they continue to interfere. She paused. Jessica, I need to ask, do you want to press charges against your mother for defamation? The family needs to know the truth. I thought about my mother's face in that hospital hallway, the theatrical tears, the way she had played the devastated grandmother while my son called for me. I thought about the messages from family members, the years of her manipulations and lies that everyone had enabled. Yes, I said. I want her held accountable for everything. Within 2 hours, Amanda had arranged for me to pick up the official police report once it was filed, expected by end of day. She had also contacted the hospital and informed them that any continued denial of my access to my son would result in legal action against the hospital and my parents personally. The hospital's legal team quickly confirmed I would be allowed to visit immediately. My father called at noon, his voice clipped. The hospital says we have to let you see Michael. Your mother is very upset. She's trying to protect him from seeing you like this, in your current state. My current state? I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. You mean the state of being falsely accused by my own mother of drunk driving with my child in the car? There was silence. Dad, I was at work. I have time-stamped video footage, and I'm picking up the police report this afternoon. The one with Mom's name on it as the driver, the one that shows her blood alcohol level at 0.13. I heard a sharp intake of breath, then muffled voices as he covered the phone. When he came back, his voice had changed, uncertain now. There must be some mistake with the paperwork. There's no mistake, I said. The traffic cameras at Burnside and 23rd caught everything. Mom tried to give the police my name, but the footage proved she was lying. More muffled conversation, then my mother's voice in the background, high and panicked. Let me talk to her. My father's voice was barely a whisper when he returned. Jessica, please. Your mother is not well. The stress of the accident. Maybe we can discuss this privately as a family. The audacity of it staggered me. Even caught in her lie, backed into a corner by evidence, she still wanted to control the narrative, to handle it privately where she could manipulate and minimize. No, I said simply. I'll be at the hospital in an hour. If anyone tries to stop me from seeing my son, I'm calling police and child protective services. I hung up before he could respond. At 3 o'clock, I walked through the hospital's main entrance with Amanda beside me. The security guard from yesterday was at his station, and his eyes widened when he saw me. Amanda handed him a document. This is a legal notification that Mrs. Jessica Reynolds has full parental rights to see her son, Michael Reynolds, patient in room 314. Any interference will be considered a violation of her rights and will be reported to authorities. The guard read the document, glanced at me apologetically, and nodded. No problem, ma'am. Go right ahead. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor, my heart pounding harder with each floor we passed. When we reached Michael's room, I could see through the window that it was crowded. My parents, my grandmother, Aunt Linda, Uncle David, and 2 cousins I barely knew. They had assembled their audience, probably expecting to continue their show of righteous family solidarity against the reckless daughter. I pushed open the door and all conversation stopped. Michael's face lit up when he saw me. Mommy! His voice was hoarse, but filled with relief. I went straight to his bed, careful of his injuries, and held him as gently as I could while he cried into my shoulder. I thought you weren't coming. Grandma said you couldn't come because you were sick. Over his head, I met my mother's eyes. She looked smaller somehow, her makeup carefully applied, but not quite hiding the strain around her eyes. My father stood beside her, his hand on her arm, his face ashen. I'm here, baby, I said to Michael. I'm so sorry I couldn't come sooner. How are you feeling? As Michael began telling me about his broken arm and the nice nurses and how scared he had been, I let him talk, stroking his hair, grounding myself in his physical presence. Amanda stood near the door, her presence a silent reminder that this was now a legal matter. Aunt Linda broke the silence. Well, I'm glad you finally showed up. Maybe now you can explain to your son what you did. I stood up slowly, keeping one hand on Michael's uninjured arm. I didn't do anything, Aunt Linda, but I know who did. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope containing the police report. My mother's face went white. This is the official police report from yesterday's accident. It makes very interesting reading. My father stepped forward. Jessica, please, let's not do this here. Michael doesn't need to hear. I ignored him, opening the report. Driver of vehicle, Patricia Ann Reynolds. Blood alcohol content at time of accident, 0.13. Initial false statement to police. Driver gave name as Jessica Marie Reynolds before admitting true identity. The room erupted in shocked voices, but I continued reading. Contributing factors: impaired driving, excessive speed, failure to maintain lane. The driver struck a traffic pole at the intersection of Burnside and 23rd at approximately 4:17 p.m. Traffic camera footage confirms the driver was Patricia Reynolds. The driver became combative when asked to perform field sobriety tests and made multiple attempts to contact family members before being transported for blood alcohol testing. My grandmother's voice cut through the chaos. Patricia, is this true? My mother swayed dramatically, her hand going to her forehead. I don't feel well. Robert, I need to sit down. But no one moved to help her. All eyes were on the report in my hands. Uncle David reached for it. Let me see that. I handed it to him, watching as he read, his expression darkening. He passed it to Aunt Linda, who read it silently, then looked at her sister with an expression I could not quite read. You told us Jessica was driving, Linda said quietly. You called me from the hospital and said she had been drinking, that she crashed with Michael in the car and you were trying to protect her from losing custody. My mother's legs seemed to give out, and she collapsed into the chair beside Michael's bed, the theatrical faint everyone had anticipated. But this time no one rushed to comfort her. My father looked lost, his usual composure shattered. Patricia, what did you do? I was confused, my mother whispered, her voice suddenly fragile. The impact, the shock. I didn't know what I was saying. Jessica, honey, you have to understand. I would never deliberately try to hurt you. The diminutive honey, the softening of her voice, the appeal to my sympathy. It was her standard playbook. I had watched her deploy these tactics my entire life, had seen family members fall for them again and again. Not this time. You called Aunt Linda 3 hours after the accident, I said, my voice flat. That's not confusion from impact, that's calculation. You had time to craft your story, to turn the family against me, to make sure everyone believed I was the drunk driver who endangered my own son. Michael's small voice interrupted. Mommy wasn't there. Grandma picked me up from school. We went to lunch with her friends at that restaurant with the fancy lights. Grandma had the red drinks in the tall glasses. Lots of them. The innocent testimony from my 7-year-old son landed like a bomb. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time. Tears of panic rather than performance. Michael, sweetheart, you're confused, you're hurt, and the medicine is making you remember things wrong. I'm not confused, Michael said, his voice stronger. You were driving really fast and singing that song you always sing when you're happy. Then you ran the red light and I yelled, and then we hit the pole and my arm hurt really bad. You kept saying, oh no, and looking at your phone. Then the police came and you told them a different name. I heard you. You said you were mommy. The silence in the hospital room was absolute. My mother sat frozen in the chair, her mouth opening and closing without sound. My father backed away from her slowly, like she was a stranger he had just recognized. Aunt Linda's expression had transformed from confusion to cold fury. You looked me in the eye 3 hours after crashing with your grandson in the car, after driving drunk with a child, and you lied to me. You made me call Jessica horrible things. You turned the entire family against her. My grandmother stood up, her 83-year-old frame somehow seeming to tower over everyone in the room. Patricia Ann Reynolds, I have defended you for 30 years. Every little slip, every incident, every time someone questioned your drinking, I told them to mind their business. No more. She looked at me, her eyes wet. Jessica, I owe you an apology. I should have listened. I nodded, unable to speak, past the lump in my throat. Michael's small hand gripped mine tighter. Mommy, is Grandma in trouble? Yes, baby, I said quietly. Grandma made some very bad choices. My mother suddenly stood, her demeanor shifting again, this time to desperate anger. You have no idea what kind of pressure I've been under. Your father's retirement didn't go as planned. Our investments, the house expenses, and you, Jessica, so perfect with your little job and your little life, never understanding what it takes to maintain a certain standard. The words spilled out, bitter and revealing. That lunch yesterday was about a business opportunity, a real estate development deal that could have solved everything. I had 2 glasses of wine, maybe 3. I was fine. Michael was fine. The accident was just bad luck, a stupid traffic pole that came out of nowhere. Uncle David made a disgusted sound. You were 3 times over the legal limit, Patricia. You endangered a child, your grandson, and then you tried to destroy your daughter's life to cover it up. My mother whirled on him. Don't you judge me. You have no idea what it's like to have everything slipping away, to watch younger women take opportunities that should be yours, to have a daughter who looks at you with that superior attitude like she's so much better. The mask had fully cracked now, revealing the ugly resentment beneath. I had always known my mother was critical, controlling, image-obsessed. But this level of viciousness, this willingness to sacrifice me completely to save herself, was breathtaking in its cruelty. Amanda stepped forward from her position by the door. Mrs. Reynolds, I'm Jessica's attorney. I need to inform you that defamation charges will be filed against you, along with a formal complaint to the prosecutor's office regarding your attempt to frame your daughter for your crime. You should contact legal representation immediately. My mother's laugh was hollow. Legal representation? With what money? Everything is mortgaged, leveraged, borrowed against. This was supposed to be my chance to fix it all, and now you've ruined everything, Jessica, just like you always do. The venom in her voice made Michael shrink against me. I stroked his hair, keeping my voice calm. I think everyone should leave except Michael's doctor. He needs rest, and this conversation is over. My father finally found his voice, though it was shaking. Jessica, I didn't know about the finances, about any of it. She told me the retirement accounts were fine, that the house was paid off. I thought we were secure. He looked at my mother like he was seeing her for the first time. How bad is it, Patricia? How much do we owe? She laughed again. That same terrible sound. Does it matter now? It's all going to fall apart anyway. The house, the cars, the country club membership. Everything I worked for, gone because of one stupid mistake. Aunt Linda's voice was steel. The mistake was driving drunk with a child in your car. The crime was trying to blame Jessica. Everything else is just you finally facing consequences you've avoided your whole life. She turned to me. I'll be calling everyone who received my messages about you. They'll get the truth, the real truth. My mother stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. I don't have to listen to this. Robert, we're leaving, but my father didn't move. No, Patricia, you're leaving. I'm staying to talk to my daughter and my grandson. The shock on my mother's face would have been satisfying if the entire situation weren't so devastating. Robert, you can't be serious. I'm your wife. He looked at her with an expression I couldn't quite identify, something between grief and disgust. You tried to destroy our daughter. You put our grandson in the hospital. You lied to me, to everyone. I don't know who you are right now. She left then, her heels clicking sharply down the hospital corridor, her exit far less dramatic than she probably wanted. The remaining family members began trickling out as well, uncomfortable with the intimate destruction of my parents' marriage playing out before them. Aunt Linda squeezed my shoulder as she passed. I'll make this right with the family, Jessica, I promise. And my grandmother kissed Michael's forehead, then mine. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. Your grandfather would be proud. She paused at the door. Patricia needs help, real help. but that's not your responsibility anymore. After they left, my father pulled a chair close to Michael's bed. Jessica, I know I failed you. I should have seen what was happening. I should have questioned her story immediately. He rubbed his face wearily. Looking back now, there were so many signs. The drinking, the financial secrets, the way she'd twist situations to make herself the victim. I told myself I was being supportive, but I was just enabling her. Michael had fallen asleep, exhausted from the emotional chaos. I watched his chest rise and fall, so grateful he was alive and recovering, despite everything. What are you going to do, Dad? I'm talking to a lawyer tomorrow, he said quietly. About separation, maybe divorce. I can't go back from this. He looked at me with genuine remorse. I'm so sorry, Jessica. For yesterday, for all the years before when I should have protected you from her manipulation, for teaching you that keeping up appearances was more important than truth. We sat in silence for a while, watching Michael sleep. Finally, my father stood. I'll make sure the house and my retirement accounts are secured before she can do anything with them, and I'll testify, if it comes to that, she needs to be held accountable. After he left, I sat alone with my son, processing everything that had unfolded. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members who had heard the truth, their apologies ranging from genuine to awkwardly self-serving. I turned the phone off. Amanda had left me with instructions to document everything and meet with the prosecutor's office later in the week. The charges against my mother would include DUI with a minor in the vehicle, child endangerment, providing false information to police, and depending on the prosecutor's approach, potentially more. My phone rang before I could silence it, a Portland number I didn't recognize. Is this Jessica Reynolds? Yes? Who's calling? The woman's voice was professional but sympathetic. This is Detective Sharon Moore with Portland Police. I'm investigating the accident involving your son and your mother. I was hoping we could meet tomorrow to discuss her attempt to provide false identification. We take those cases very seriously, especially when a child is involved. I agreed to meet her the next morning. When I finally turned my phone completely off and settled into the uncomfortable hospital chair for the night, Michael stirred. Mommy, are you staying? He whispered sleepily. I'm staying right here, baby. I'm not going anywhere. He smiled and drifted back to sleep. I watched him for a long time, thinking about how close I had come to losing him. Not to the accident, but to my mother's calculated lies. If those traffic cameras had not existed, if I had not had access to the police report, I might still be fighting to prove my innocence while criminal charges piled up against me. The thought made my hands shake with delayed shock and fury. Over the next few days, the truth spread through the family with the same speed my mother's lies had spread. But this time the social media posts and group chat messages worked in my favor. Cousins who had condemned me now posted apologies. My mother's friends from the book club were mysteriously unavailable when she called. The restaurant where she had been drinking that afternoon confirmed to police that Patricia Reynolds had consumed at least 4 glasses of wine between 1 and 3:30 p.m., along with 2 vodka cocktails. The server remembered because my mother had been loud and had argued about the bill. Detective Moore was thorough in her investigation, pulling my mother's driving record and discovering 2 other minor accidents in the past 3 years, both of which my father had handled privately with insurance payouts and no police involvement. She also found the sealed DUI from 15 years ago. Your mother has a pattern, the detective told me during our meeting. The prosecutor is building a strong case. This isn't just about the accident anymore. It's about a chronic problem that culminated in child endangerment and attempted fraud. Michael was released from the hospital after 4 days. His arm would need 8 weeks to heal, and he would need follow-up appointments for the concussion, but he was otherwise okay. The psychological impact was harder to assess. He had nightmares about the crash and seemed anxious whenever we got in a car. I arranged for him to see a child therapist, another expense I hadn't budgeted for, but Amanda assured me we could seek restitution from my mother for all accident-related costs. My father filed for separation within a week. My mother had returned to their house to find the locks changed and a legal notice taped to the door. He had moved into a hotel and refused to speak to her except through his attorney. When I talked to him on the phone, he sounded both heartbroken and relieved. I found the paperwork yesterday, he told me. She's mortgaged our house 3 times. We owe more than it's worth. She's been gambling online, investing in schemes that failed. Everything she told me about our finances was a lie. I'm sorry, Dad, I said, meaning it. Despite everything, he was still my father, and watching his life implode was painful. Don't be sorry, he replied. This is what should have happened years ago. I just wish it hadn't taken Michael getting hurt and you nearly being destroyed for me to see it. The legal process moved forward with surprising speed. My mother was formally charged with DUI with a minor passenger, child endangerment, and providing false information to law enforcement. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor, a woman named Catherine Brooks who had a reputation for being tough on repeat offenders, wasn't interested. "Your mother had multiple opportunities to be honest," Catherine told me during a meeting at her office. Instead, she chose to commit additional crimes to cover the first one. She chose to attempt to destroy her own daughter's life and reputation. The state has a strong interest in prosecuting this fully. 3 weeks after the accident, my mother's preliminary hearing was scheduled. Amanda and I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom. My mother looked diminished in her conservative suit, her hair pulled back severely, none of her usual confidence evident. When the judge read the charges, her hands trembled visibly. The judge set bail at $50,000 and ordered my mother to surrender her passport and submit to random alcohol testing. My father was not in the courtroom, had made it clear he would not be posting bail or providing financial support. My mother's attorney argued she was not a flight risk and had strong community ties. The prosecutor countered with her history of deception and financial desperation. The judge sided with the prosecution, and my mother was led away to await bail she couldn't afford. The preliminary hearing had been scheduled for a Friday morning, but by Wednesday afternoon, everything accelerated unexpectedly. Detective Moore called me at work. "Jessica, your mother made bail. We need to talk about a protection order." My stomach dropped. "How?" "My father said he wouldn't help her." The detective's voice was grim. "She posted bail using a bond from a company that charges predatory interest rates. She essentially mortgaged her future for temporary freedom. But that's not why I'm calling. She's been contacting family members, trying to convince them to speak on her behalf, and some of her statements are concerning." "What kind of statements?" I asked, my hand tightening around the phone. "Statements suggesting you're orchestrating this prosecution out of spite, claims that you've always wanted to hurt her, that you're an unfit mother using this situation to turn Michael against his grandmother. She's also posted on social media that the police report was falsified." My head spun. Even facing criminal charges, even caught in irrefutable lies, my mother was still manipulating, still trying to control the narrative. "I'm sending you screenshots of her posts," Detective Moore continued. "I'm also recommending you file for a restraining order immediately, especially given that she knows where you live and work." That evening, Amanda and I filed for an emergency protective order, citing my mother's erratic behavior and continued defamation. The judge granted a temporary order valid until a full hearing could be scheduled. My mother was served that night at the rundown motel where she was staying, having been effectively locked out of her own home by my father's separation proceedings. The next day, my phone exploded with messages from family members showing me my mother's Facebook posts. In them, she had crafted an elaborate narrative about being the victim of a conspiracy. According to her version, I had always been jealous of her success, her social standing, her relationship with Michael. She claimed I had somehow falsified police reports and paid off witnesses to frame her. The posts were long, rambling, and increasingly unhinged. She accused my father of having an affair and using the accident as an excuse to leave her. She accused me of abusing Michael and using him as a pawn. She even accused Aunt Linda of being part of the conspiracy because Linda was jealous of her. The comments section was brutal. Family members who had believed her initial lies now saw this for what it was: a desperate woman incapable of accepting responsibility, willing to destroy anyone to save herself. Former friends commented with disbelief and disgust, but there were a few defenders, people who bought into her victim narrative or who had their own reasons to believe in conspiracy theories. Friday morning arrived, and Michael's school called. "Mrs. Reynolds, we need to inform you that Patricia Reynolds attempted to pick up Michael from school today. She became agitated when we told her she wasn't on the approved pickup list and that we had been informed she was not to have contact with Michael. We had to call police to escort her from the premises. The protective order had been violated within 48 hours. I left work immediately and went to Michael's school, where 2 police officers were taking statements. My son was in the principal's office, looking small and scared. Grandma was crying, he told me. She said she just wanted to hug me. She said you were keeping her away and it wasn't fair." The police arrested my mother that afternoon for violating the protective order. Her bail was revoked, and she was held pending her full hearing. Her social media posts continued from jail, written through a friend who was posting on her behalf, each one more desperate and accusatory than the last. They were also increasingly sloppy, contradicting earlier versions of her story, revealing details she shouldn't have known if she had truly been confused after the accident. Amanda compiled all of it meticulously. "She's building our case for us," Amanda said with grim satisfaction. "Every post, every violation, every lie adds weight to the prosecution." The full hearing was rescheduled for 2 weeks later, given the additional charges. My mother's attorney tried one last time to negotiate a plea, but Catherine Brooks had lost all patience. "Your client has demonstrated zero remorse, continued to defame and harass the victim, violated a protective order, and attempted to interfere with the victim's parenting. We're going to trial, and we're seeking the maximum sentence." During those 2 weeks, more family secrets surfaced. My father's attorney discovered my mother had taken out credit cards in his name without his knowledge. She had forged his signature on loan documents. She had cleaned out a joint investment account 6 months earlier, claiming it was for home improvements that never happened. The financial devastation was staggering. My father estimated she had accumulated over $300,000 in hidden debt, much of it from online gambling and failed real estate schemes. The house would have to be sold, and even then would barely cover what was owed. My grandmother visited me one afternoon, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea she barely touched. "I've been thinking about your mother's childhood," she said quietly. "Her father, my husband, he had a drinking problem. He was a mean drunk, violent sometimes. I protected Patricia from the worst of it, or I thought I did. Maybe I taught her the wrong lessons about hiding problems, about maintaining appearances instead of facing truth." "That's not your fault, Grandma," I said. "Mom made her own choices as an adult." She shook her head. "I know that. But I wonder if I had been stronger, braver, if I had left him instead of staying and pretending everything was fine, maybe Patricia would have learned different lessons. Maybe she would have learned that accountability matters more than image." She looked at me with fierce intensity. "Don't you dare follow that pattern, Jessica. You fight for truth, you hold people accountable, you protect Michael from learning the wrong lessons. Promise me." "I promise," I said, and meant it. The day before the hearing, Catherine Brooks called with unexpected news. "Your mother's attorney contacted us with a new plea offer. She'll plead guilty to all charges if we agree to recommend probation instead of prison time." I felt my jaw clench. "No, absolutely not." Catherine's voice held approval. "That's what I told him. Your mother endangered a child, attempted to frame you for serious crimes, violated protective orders, and has shown zero genuine remorse. She's going to face real consequences." The courtroom was packed on the day of my mother's hearing. My father sat on my side of the room, a visible statement of where his loyalties now lay. Aunt Linda was there, along with my grandmother and several cousins. On my mother's side sat only 2 people, a distant cousin who barely knew her, and a woman I didn't recognize who turned out to be from her bail bond company, there to ensure her investment was protected. My mother entered wearing an orange jail jumpsuit, her hair unwashed and hanging limply around her face. The transformation from the perfectly coiffed woman who had sobbed theatrically in Michael's hospital room was startling. She looked years older, haggard, defeated. But when her eyes met mine, I saw no remorse, only burning resentment. The prosecutor presented her case methodically, introducing the police report with its documented blood alcohol level of 0.13, the traffic camera footage showing my mother behind the wheel, the hospital records confirming Michael's injuries, and the recording of her initial false statement to police giving my name as the driver. Then came the evidence of the aftermath. Screenshots of her defamatory social media posts, testimony from family members about how she had turned them against me with deliberate lies, documentation of the protective order violation when she tried to take Michael from school, and phone records showing she had called 15 different family members in 3 hours after the accident, crafting her false narrative before I even knew what had happened. Amanda testified about the emotional and financial damage to me, the cost of legal fees, the therapy bills for Michael, the damage to my reputation. My father testified about discovering my mother's hidden debts and financial fraud, his voice breaking as he described feeling betrayed by a 30-year marriage built on lies. Most devastating was the testimony from the restaurant server who had served my mother that afternoon. She had 4 glasses of Chardonnay and 2 vodka sodas between 1 and 3:30 p.m., the young woman stated clearly. When I suggested she might want to call a ride, she laughed and said she was a better driver drunk than most people were sober. I was worried when I saw her leave with the little boy. My mother's attorney tried to present a defense based on her struggles with alcohol addiction, her recent financial stress, her moment of panic after the accident that led to poor decisions. He brought in a therapist who testified that my mother suffered from narcissistic personality traits and difficulty accepting responsibility, but could benefit from treatment. The judge, an older woman named Victoria Henderson with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings, listened impassively. When it was time for my mother to speak, she stood slowly. I expected another performance, more tears and theatrical remorse. Instead, she looked directly at me and said, "This is all your fault, Jessica. If you had just signed those loan papers when I asked you last year, none of this would have happened. I wouldn't have been so stressed. I wouldn't have needed those drinks. Michael wouldn't have been in the car at all." The courtroom fell silent. Even her own attorney looked shocked. She continued, her voice rising. "You've always thought you were better than me, with your perfect job and your perfect apartment and your perfect single mother act. You don't know what it takes to maintain a lifestyle, to have standards. I gave you everything growing up, and this is how you repay me? By destroying my life?" Judge Henderson's voice cut through the tirade like a blade. "Mrs. Reynolds, sit down." But my mother wasn't finished. "That police report is wrong. I barely had anything to drink. 2 glasses, maybe 3. The restaurant is lying to cover themselves. The traffic cameras were at a bad angle. Michael doesn't remember correctly because of his concussion, and Jessica has manipulated everyone into believing her version because she's always been good at playing the victim. Mrs. Reynolds," the judge's voice was harder now, "sit down immediately, or I will hold you in contempt." My mother finally sat, but her expression remained defiant. Judge Henderson reviewed her notes for a long moment, then looked up. "I've been a judge for 22 years, and in that time I've seen many cases of drunk driving, child endangerment, and attempted fraud, but I have rarely seen such a complete lack of remorse, such utter unwillingness to accept responsibility for actions that could have killed a child." She looked directly at my mother. "Mrs. Reynolds, you drove with a blood alcohol level nearly twice the legal limit with your 7-year-old grandson in the car. When you crashed, you attempted to frame your own daughter for your crime. You lied to police, lied to your family, and then spent weeks conducting a harassment campaign against your daughter to cover your actions. You violated a protective order by attempting to take your grandson from school. And even now, standing in this courtroom, you blame everyone but yourself." The judge's voice was cold with controlled anger. "The prosecution has recommended the maximum sentence, and I am inclined to agree. However, I want to address something you said, Mrs. Reynolds. You stated this was your daughter's fault for not signing loan papers. Can you elaborate on that?" My mother's attorney tried to intervene, but she spoke over him. "Last year, I needed Jessica to co-sign on a business loan. It was a real estate investment opportunity that would have solved all our financial problems. She refused. If she had just helped her own mother, I wouldn't have been under such financial strain. None of this would have happened." The judge turned to the prosecutor. "Ms. Brooks, was this mentioned in any of the discovery materials?" Catherine stood. "No, Your Honor. This is the first I'm hearing of it." The judge looked back at my mother. "So your defense is that your daughter's refusal to take on financial risk on your behalf justifies you driving drunk with her child in your car, nearly killing him, and then attempting to destroy her life to cover it up?" The silence was absolute. My mother seemed to finally realize she had said something catastrophic, but it was too late. Judge Henderson's expression was carved from stone. "Mrs. Reynolds, I find you guilty on all counts. On the charge of DUI with a minor passenger, I sentence you to 5 years in state prison. On the charge of child endangerment, I sentence you to 3 years to run consecutively. On the charge of providing false information to law enforcement, I sentence you to 2 years, also consecutive. On the charge of violating a protective order, I sentence you to 1 year, consecutive. Total sentence, 11 years in state prison with possibility of parole after serving 85%. The courtroom erupted. My mother's attorney was on his feet, arguing for leniency. But the judge held up her hand. "I am also ordering that upon release, Mrs. Reynolds will have no contact with her grandson for the duration of his minority. She will be required to complete substance abuse treatment and pay full restitution to Jessica Reynolds for all legal fees, therapy costs, and damages. The protective order is made permanent." My mother collapsed in her chair, sobbing now. Real tears finally, but tears of self-pity rather than remorse. As the bailiff led her away, she turned to look at me one last time, and the hatred in her eyes was pure and undiluted. "I hope you're happy," she screamed. "You've destroyed your own mother." I stood up, my voice clear and steady in the silent courtroom. "No, you destroyed yourself. I just refuse to let you destroy me too." Outside the courthouse, my father wrapped me in a tight embrace. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "So proud." Aunt Linda approached hesitantly. "Jessica, I know I failed you. I believed her so easily. Turned on you so quickly. I don't know if I can ever make that right. I looked at her, this woman who had called me horrible things, who had believed the worst about me without question. You can make it right by never letting mom manipulate you again. By standing up for truth even when it's uncomfortable. By remembering this moment the next time someone's reputation is being destroyed on hearsay. The news coverage was immediate and brutal for my mother. Grandmother gets 11 years for drunk driving crash and frame-up attempt, read the headlines. The story went viral, with commentators expressing shock at the calculated cruelty of a mother trying to destroy her daughter to avoid consequences. My mother's mugshot became a cautionary tale shared thousands of times on social media. The public shaming she had tried to orchestrate against me had boomeranged back on her with devastating force. Over the following weeks, the full extent of her financial crimes came to light. She had committed identity theft against my father, fraud against multiple creditors, and embezzlement from a community organization she had volunteered for. Additional charges were filed. My father moved forward with divorce proceedings, and the house was sold at a loss. He moved into a modest apartment, starting over at 62 years old, but he seemed lighter somehow, freed from years of enabling and lying. I should have protected you from her, he told me one evening over dinner. Not just now, but always. I taught you that keeping peace in the family was more important than standing up for what's right. I'm sorry. You're protecting me now, I said. That matters. Michael's therapy was progressing well. His nightmares had decreased, and he was talking more openly about the accident. His therapist said he was resilient, but would need continued support to process the betrayal by his grandmother. When he asked why Grandma tried to blame me for the crash, I struggled for age-appropriate words. Sometimes people make bad choices, I finally said, and then instead of admitting they were wrong, they make more bad choices trying to hide the first ones. Grandma made a lot of bad choices, and now she has to face the consequences. Like when I lied about breaking your lamp and said it was the cat? He asked. And you knew I was lying because we don't have a cat? I smiled despite myself. Yes, like that. Except Grandma's lies hurt people. Hurt you and me and Grandpa. So her consequences are much more serious. He thought about this. I don't think I want to see Grandma anymore. Even when I'm grown up. Is that okay? I pulled him close. That's completely okay, baby. You get to decide who you want in your life based on how they treat you and the people you love. 18 months after the accident, I stood in the parking lot of Providence Portland Medical Center, the same hospital where my mother had banned me from seeing Michael. Today was different. Michael was here for his final orthopedic checkup, his arm having healed completely. We walked through the doors together, his small hand in mine. The same security guard from that first awful day was at his station. He recognized me and smiled. Good to see you, ma'am. How's the little guy doing? Michael beamed and showed him his arm. All better, see? You can't even tell it was broken. In the waiting room, Michael colored in his activity book while I reflected on how much had changed. My mother was serving her sentence at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, where she had been classified as a difficult inmate due to her refusal to participate in substance abuse programming and her continued insistence that she was the victim of a conspiracy. She had written me exactly 3 letters, each one demanding I recant my testimony and help appeal her sentence. I had returned all 3 unopened. My father had visited her once, 6 months into her sentence. He came back looking shaken. She spent the entire visit trying to convince me you had somehow orchestrated everything, that you were behind all her legal problems and our financial ruin. She hasn't changed at all. She still can't see what she did wrong. He never visited again. Our relationship had rebuilt slowly, cautiously. He attended Michael's soccer games, took him to movies, had dinner at my place once a week. He had started his own therapy, working through decades of enabling behavior, and examining why he had found it easier to go along with my mother's manipulations than confront them. I think I was scared of her, he admitted once. Scared of her rage, her ability to make me feel like I was the crazy one for questioning her. It was easier to just smooth things over than stand up to her. Aunt Linda had become an unexpected ally. She now ran a support group for people who had been manipulated by family members, using her own experience to help others recognize gaslighting and emotional abuse. I was so ready to believe the worst about you, she told me during a coffee date. Not because I had evidence, but because Patricia had trained all of us to never question her narrative. I'm working on being a better person, a more critical thinker. The civil lawsuit I had filed against my mother for defamation, emotional distress, and damages resulted in a judgment of $437,000, though I would likely never see most of it given her imprisonment and lack of assets. But the judgment itself mattered. The legal acknowledgement that what she had done was wrong, damaging, and actionable. My career had flourished in unexpected ways. Dr. Kim promoted me to office manager, with a raise that significantly improved my financial security. I had started a small side business doing consulting for other dental practices, helping them improve their operational efficiency. The business was growing steadily, providing both extra income and professional satisfaction. I had also started speaking at local organizations about the experience, talking about how to protect yourself from family manipulation, the importance of documentation and evidence when someone is trying to destroy your reputation, and the reality that sometimes the most toxic people in your life are the ones who share your DNA. The speaking engagements brought their own rewards, including connections with other survivors of parental narcissism. One of those connections turned into a friendship with a man named David, a divorced father of 2, who had also been scapegoated by his family. We started dating 6 months ago, taking it slow, both of us cautious after our experiences, but he was kind, patient, and unfailingly honest, qualities I now valued above all else. Michael liked him, which mattered immensely. When we told Michael we were dating, his response was thoughtful. "Does he lie?" Michael asked. "No," I assured him. "If he lied, I wouldn't be with him." Michael nodded seriously. "Good, because liars are the worst." The legal system had not been finished with my mother after her criminal sentence. The community organization she had embezzled from filed charges, resulting in an additional 3 years added to her sentence. Her former book club friends testified about her drinking patterns, destroying any remaining credibility she had. The restaurant where she had gotten drunk before the accident was fined for overserving her, but their testimony had been crucial in establishing her pattern of behavior. Last week, my mother's attorney contacted Amanda about the possibility of my mother showing remorse and seeking family reconciliation as part of a parole strategy. "She's coming up on her first parole hearing in 3 years," the attorney explained. "If she can demonstrate family support and genuine change, her chances improve significantly." Amanda's response was swift. "My client has no interest in facilitating her mother's parole. Mrs. Patricia Reynolds attempted to destroy my client's life, endangered her grandson, and has shown zero genuine remorse. She made her choices. Now she lives with the consequences." When Amanda relayed this to me, I felt no guilt, no wavering. My mother had taught me one final, crucial lesson, though not the one she intended: that forgiveness is not owed to people who refuse to acknowledge their wrongs, that family ties do not obligate you to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, and that protecting yourself and your child from toxic people is not cruelty, it is wisdom. Michael's doctor declared him fully healed, releasing him from orthopedic care. As we left the hospital, Michael asked, "Mommy, do you think Grandma misses me?" I chose my words carefully. "I think she probably misses the idea of you, baby. But real love means protecting the people you care about, even when it's hard. Grandma showed us she doesn't know how to do that, like how you protected me by telling the truth even when the family was mad at you." I squeezed his hand. Exactly like that. We walked to the car through the bright afternoon sunshine. My phone buzzed with a text from David asking if we wanted to join him and his kids for dinner. Michael bounced excitedly when I told him, "Yes, can we go to that pizza place with the arcade?" I smiled, feeling the weight of the past 18 months finally lifting. Absolutely. That evening, watching Michael laugh while playing arcade games with David's daughter, I thought about my mother sitting in her cell, still spinning narratives of victimhood, still believing she had done nothing wrong. She would probably serve her full sentence, her parole repeatedly denied because she could never admit fault, could never express genuine remorse. She would leave prison in her early 70s, her reputation destroyed, her family scattered, her grandson grown and having no memory of her beyond the trauma of the accident. She had sacrificed everything, her freedom, her marriage, her family, her dignity, rather than accept responsibility for driving drunk with a child in her car. Some people called my response harsh. A few distant relatives suggested I was being unforgiving, that everyone deserves a second chance, that family should always reconcile, but they hadn't been there. They hadn't seen my 7-year-old son calling for me while my mother banned me from his hospital room. They hadn't experienced the calculated viciousness of watching your own mother try to destroy your life to save herself. They hadn't felt the terror of knowing that without traffic camera footage, you might be in prison right now for a crime you didn't commit. My grandmother passed away 6 months ago, peacefully in her sleep at 85. Before she died, she made a point of telling me she was proud of me. "You broke the cycle," she whispered, her hand weak in mine. "Patricia tried to make you carry on the family tradition of lying and appearances and enabling, but you chose truth instead. You chose to protect Michael. That takes real strength." At her funeral, my mother was not granted permission to attend, despite her attorney's requests. My father gave a eulogy that carefully avoided mentioning his estranged wife, talking instead about his mother-in-law's kindness, her love of gardening, and her fierce protection of family. Real family, the kind built on love rather than obligation. After the service, he gave me a small box. "Mom wanted you to have this." Inside was my grandmother's wedding ring and a note in her shaky handwriting. For Jessica, who learned that real family is built on honesty, not lies. "I'm sorry I didn't teach your mother that lesson, but I'm so glad you learned it anyway. Love always, Grandma." I wear the ring now on my right hand, a reminder of the grandmother who finally spoke truth in the end, who broke her own enabling pattern too late to save my mother, but in time to support me. Michael is thriving. His grades are excellent. He has friends. He's joined a youth soccer league. His therapist says he shows remarkable emotional intelligence for his age, likely because he witnessed firsthand that love and loyalty should never require accepting lies or abuse. When he talks about the accident now, it's matter of fact, processed and integrated rather than traumatic. "That was when Grandma made really bad choices," he explains to new friends who ask about his grandmother's absence. "So she's in timeout for a very long time." Last month, I was asked to speak at a conference about family estrangement and narcissistic abuse. Standing before 200 people, I told my story, complete with the police reports, the medical records, the social media receipts, all the documentation that had saved me. Afterward, at least 30 people approached me with their own stories of being scapegoated, blamed, gaslit by family members who could never accept responsibility. "How did you stay strong?" a young woman asked, tears streaming down her face. "My mother blames me for everything, and sometimes I wonder if she's right, if I really am the problem." I took her hands and looked her in the eyes. "You stay strong by documenting everything, by trusting evidence over emotion, by surrounding yourself with people who value truth over appearances, and you remember that someone who truly loves you will never try to destroy you to save themselves." My mother comes up for parole in 2 years. Her attorney has already begun reaching out, testing whether I might be willing to write a letter of support. My answer remains the same. No. Not because I haven't healed, but because I have. I've learned that healing doesn't require reconciliation with your abuser. It requires building a life where their toxicity can no longer touch you. Tonight, I tucked Michael into bed and he asked me to tell him again about how I knew he needed me at the hospital, how I fought to get to him, how I didn't give up even when everyone said I was wrong. He loves this story. The way children love stories where good triumphs over evil, where truth wins over lies. "You're the bravest person I know, Mommy," he said sleepily. I kissed his forehead. "We're brave together, baby. We tell the truth, we stand up for what's right, and we protect each other. That's what real family does." As I turned off his light, I thought about my mother in her cell, probably still crafting narratives, still blaming everyone but herself. She had tried to make me a villain in her story. Instead, she had written herself as the cautionary tale, and I had written myself free.